Welcome back to another project, guys. Today we're working on Guts from Berserk, and this is an absolutely huge commission. And yeah, I don't know what I got myself into with this one, but this guy is absolutely massive. It's in 1/4 scale, and if you're not familiar who Guts is, it's this guy from an anime called Berserk. That the picture's up here on the screen that I'm using as reference. And after this session here, it's going to kind of look a little bit like what we've got right here. Here's a bit of an after photo, a little bit of a spoiler for you. But as I'm priming this, we're just going to go ahead and focus mostly on getting a bunch of color down, because this guy is absolutely enormous, and it's going to take quite a bit of time for me to get through all this here. I think it took like upwards of an hour just to get everything blocked in and highlighted. And so yeah, this one's going to take a while. And one of the first things that you're going to notice is that I've actually left a little bit of spots there on the sword dark, and I'm doing that intentionally because I'm going to come back in at the end and really tie things all together and give it a really battered look. So when I'm spraying all of this stuff together, I'm just essentially putting white down on top of the model where I think all of the brightest points would go. And this is usually just called a Zenithal highlight. Just really doing it top down, blocking in a bunch of stuff right now. As I mentioned, I'm just trying to get some color on the model. There's really nothing special to it at this point. We just want to make sure that the brightest points are really white and that the darkest points kind of stay this black primer color. Now, as I get some skin on here, I spray it on a little bit and I realize this is a little too orange, a little bit too yellow for my liking. I'm going to need to go back in with some red and touch this up. So this guy that Guts has slain here, no spoilers for anybody that's still reading the manga or anything. This guy that he's killed here is clearly, mutated. Let's say he might be a demon, something like that. And he's got a lot of red color in him, and there's a lot of blood and gore in this model that we're putting together, that we're sculpting. And when we look at a lot of these base skin tones, they're going to be a lot more purple and red than you might think, even if the skin color is quite white on the surface. Like if somebody's going for a Caucasian skin tone, you're really going to want to put down these darker colors than you think as a base tone, and then build up to that afterwards. So if you're using an airbrush, it's really easy to just take purple or red and spray it on underneath a little bit of an angle, and you'll be totally fine. When it comes to the base here, I'm actually using an Army Painter speed paint through the airbrush to do this, just to add a little bit of time and keep a lot of this dark texture that I want. I'm not taking a lot of time here to make this fancy. I'm just trying to spray this on and get something going on the base, and we can come back and touch it up later. But oftentimes the base of your piece is not going to be where the eye is drawn anyway, so I tend to spend less time on it overall, unless you have a really beautiful intricate base, and in that case go crazy. But here it's quite literally like dirt and a rock, so we're just going to kind of make it look like a haphazard dirt rock, right? So now that we've got back to the body of the model itself, we're going to move on to a regular brush instead of the airbrush. Now, I'm going to use a speed paint again because I really like how they run in this case. And these little tentacles that this guy has are very glossy in my mind, and I think speed paint works perfectly for that. It's going to run, it's going to pool into the recesses, it's going to stay dark there, and I think it's perfect for whatever the heck this is that's coming out of this guy's mouth. So it's going to go on, it's going to stay really nice and vibrant, and then if we want to keep it shiny, what we're going to do a little bit later is just add a gloss varnish to it. So I definitely recommend, if you ever have something that you want to keep liquid, just have a little bit of gloss varnish handy, wait for it to dry and brush it over, or in my case, I'm just going to use the airbrush to brush it on. When we're putting white back on this model, it's not really because he's going to have these pearly white teeth, but it's because I want there to be a lot of light here. So anytime I'm adding white to the model, I want you to think just bright light. We're almost always going to go over true whites with some kind of a color, because true white is not really even that prevalent in the real world. To be honest, it's always kind of an off-white. So I'm just going to get the white in here as a base so that the color that I put on over it appears brighter than the surrounding areas that might not have any white base to it. If I just were to put some of these thin paints or filters over the top of the black primer, you wouldn't even be able to tell a difference, to be honest. So that's all I'm doing here, is adding a little bit of white on. I'm going to grab a dry brush, do the exact same thing to all these nasty like intestines and stuff in the back. We're just putting white on it. That way, when we get this nasty color to show through, it's going to be very vibrant compared to the skin tone. So here's exactly what I was talking about. We're just going over the top of these teeth with speed paint. I know my head is kind of getting in the way here because I need to get in here close and see this, but they're going to be pretty nasty. Like, these teeth are going to dry and they're not going to be quite so dark as they appear there, but ultimately that's going to show through so much better because of this white undercoat that we put on here. You'll see how the speed paint really pools in the recesses there, like down at the bottom of his gums. It's a lot darker than it is up at the top, and when this dries, it really adds a lot of depth to shadows. And I just find that this paint range, the Army Painter Speed Paint range, is phenomenal for that. It really does a good job of doing pretty much all of the dirty work for you. You don't have to worry about going in and layering all these individual details when the model is so huge, to be honest. On smaller models, definitely, if you're painting army painting or small 32 millimeter miniatures or even smaller than that, you're going to notice that you do need to take the time to kind of build up different layers. But when the model is this huge, any tool you can use to just help cover more ground in the beginning is ultimately a lifesaver, because even though I'm using these time-saving techniques, it still takes hours. Just all this footage put together here is probably somewhere around 3 hours all said and done, when I got everything primed and then Zenithaled on top and actually started in blocking color. So the models are really big. They do take a lot of time. So if I had to layer every single individual tooth, I would be here for days on end. The good thing about a model that's this big is you can kind of like make mistakes, and they're a lot easier to fix. If I'm screwing up a tooth here, the size and scale allows me to easily make a correction that won't matter in terms of the overall scale of the piece, especially like those eyes in there. If I were to do this on a tiny model, you get maybe like one little dab of the brush, and if it's in the wrong place, you kind of screw everything up on a face, right? But in this case, I actually suggest you start with some of these bigger pieces. You give it a try and paint a display model. You might find that it's actually a lot less intimidating than painting some miniatures, just because there's really more real estate to cover, and you have flexibility. You can just make mistakes, and it's really not that big of a deal. This step, I'm just deciding to take this same paint that I did for all the teeth, blow it through the airbrush instead, and just get some quick coverage on these claws. I could have done it with the brush as well, but I just had the airbrush sitting there, and I kind of wanted them to have a slightly different look than the teeth themselves, so they didn't just look identical. Usually when display pieces have something that looks like you used an identical color on them, it's just like something that was a little uncanny about it. So I actually sprayed the same color on, and then I went back over this with like an off gray contrast paint over the top of it too, to kind of give it maybe like an enamel feel, I guess you could say, and it will make it so that the two materials, the teeth and the claws, are visually distinct, even though they might be maybe like biologically a very similar material. And it's really minor, but I like the difference. I think it just makes it not too crazy. And then now we are going to go back in and add even more purple that I was talking about in terms of that flesh tone. So his mouth is looking very one-dimensional. Everything's the same shade. And so I'm going to go back in around the lips, around the nose, deep inside of his mouth, along this tongue and everything. And I'm going to just add in shades of deep red and purple to really show where blood is flowing, right? Where is all of this guy's veins? Where are all these like capillaries that are more towards the surface? Where is blood flowing? And this is really just gonna make everything look a little bit grosser, to be honest. And this is kind of the good thing about a crazy, nasty, gritty display piece is it's all just going to be a little over the top anyway. It's not pristine. You know, it's not one of these like beautiful models where every single line is going to be perfect. So I actually just apply this speed paint directly to the back of this model here. And I know the focus got a little off, but you can see the idea that I'm talking about. It's going to be nasty and it's going to be vibrant, getting this purple up in there. This kind of like yeah, it's pretty rough. It's a pretty rough one to look at, but we're going to also spray this with a gloss varnish afterwards so that it stays shiny like that you're seeing. So here I go in and I just kind of tidy up this transition where our skin actually, you know, begins its cut, and then we go back in and blend that out. But it's really pretty incredible the realistic look you can get with speed paints when you have that nice white zenithal over the top that I showed you about. So you can see here that that purple really stays in there and stays in those recesses quite a bit more than the other sections. Now this next section is actually pretty fun because what I'm doing is I'm intentionally creating a clog in the airbrush and creating these little splatter effects. I'm pulling the trigger back with ink in it and then pressing the trigger so that it splatters, which is normally something you don't want to do because it will clog the airbrush, but I'm just using that to create this blood splatter effect. And you can do as much or little as this as you prefer. I think we don't need too much. It's something really easy that goes on at the end anyway, so we can always come back and do more of this. So here I'm just going in with that gloss varnish that I talked about earlier, painting it on where necessary, but mostly just making sure the whole thing looks nice and shiny. Anything that's supposed to be wet is going to look wet after you apply that gloss varnish to it. So if you want your paint to look the same color that it went on before it had time to dry, gloss varnish is going to be a great option. And after this, I figured it's time to take a break from all that gore, and we just need to get the rest of this guy all zenithalled up. So same concept here as before. We're just kind of doing everything with a top-down lighting, imagining where all of the brightest points would be, and then trying to not overdo it. So on the underside of his arm, we're not going to go crazy. On any undersides of pouches that are going to be facing away from the viewer, those can stay mostly gray. And we're just going to make sure that everything gets a smooth coverage here, so nothing fancy at all. Now we're going to move on to another piece of the base, but this time it's just going to be an old rusted sword. So what I'm doing here is I'm just putting these metallic paints through the airbrush, and I'm just going to brush on what I think is good. I've got a rust color specifically from Vallejo. I'm going to spray that on there. I've got some steel, I've got some gold, and then we're going to beat this thing up. So I'm just going to take that steel paint and blast through here, put some chips on the side, edge highlight this thing up, make it look really nice and clean, and then after that, we're just going to make it really dirty again. So now that we have this blade, this is kind of sitting there, nothing fancy, nothing crazy. We're going to add some darker colors to it. We're going to figure out what color we want this hilt to be. So I'm thinking that it's just going to be super standard, non-distracting brown. Slapping some brown hardened leather on there. Again, contrast paint. We really just want to do the heavy lifting for us. It's going to flow into the recesses. Now that I've got this brown kind of blocked in here, I'm kind of thinking about what more we need to do to weather it. And a Citadel makes a great paint that a lot of Warhammer painters are going to know, called Agrax Earthshade. And Agrax Earthshade is essentially just something that you slap on your models to give things a lot of battle damage and just make things look beat up. So I'm just going to slather that over the entire thing and call it good, because honestly this is just going on to the base anyway. It's not a focal point. Now this guy also has like a centipede growing out of him or something, and I didn't really know where to go color wise here, so I'm just going to go like off black and gray. So I just use a pearlized black on that and then painted in his little claw leg things, whatever millipedes have, or whatever, and painted them in similar to the claws and the teeth of the main body. And I'm just going to put some little red eyes on him. And at this point, this is where I'm going to call this section of the model done, since we're mostly done with the base here. Clearly, there's still a lot left to go, so this is going to definitely be another multi-part project. But if you made it this far, thank you very much for sticking around. If you like the progress so far, if you like the commissions, the style, please like the video. If you'd like to see more and you want to follow along, consider subscribing. And until then, this is kind of a general idea of where we're leaving off with the base. Next, we really get into the fun stuff and work on the main body.